All right, Simon, great to see you. Thanks for joining me. Before I get into things, I just want to read something that really kind of struck me, which was about you, your statement about who you are. I'm a philosopher by heart, a poet by calling, a musician in my being. I wander in lofty woodlands. I sit upon high mountain tops. I dance on the vines of eternity. I eat the ancient fruit. I reflect the light of the sun. I search for an evening mouse. I commune with a sage as we drink from the fountain hidden within the distant hills. I feel deeply. I am broken. I am healed. I seek not to heal others, but rather I allow my own heart to be healed. And I seek cures for the illness which has so firmly taken hold of my soul, which yearns to be free. Time and fate will tell if such a pursuit will be a benefit to either myself or others. As such, let us now wander these dark and ancient forests together, even that we might increase our chances of survival in this game, and even that we might follow the straight and narrow path of alignment, strengthened in our resolve by those with whom we are traveling. Wow. You say a lot there. What's the game to you? Is that the game of life?
The game. Well, you could say it's life, I guess. And firstly, I just want to say that I'm honored that you found that piece on the site and you took enough from it to say, I want to start by reading this. Because when you write a piece like that and when you put that front and center on the website to describe who you are, you kind of think, is anybody going to get anything from it?
Yeah,
Does
you're
this
baring your
help
soul.
people to understand what I'm doing? But when you say the game, when I write the game, I think what I'm talking about is it sounds cheesy, but the game of life. But when I say the game of life, I mean, do we truly take this thing called life with the degree of seriousness with which it deserves to be taken? And do we truly step back from time to time and say, what the hell are we all doing here? Really, What are we doing here? What am I doing here? What am I doing in this moment, in this time, in this place? And so when I refer to the game or this game of life, I'm trying to call people to see it as, well, there is a game that we're playing here, and perhaps there is an objective. And do we even know what that objective is? Do we even know how to seek that objective? Do we even know how to ask the question what that objective is?
Right.
So for me, it's about getting a bit of a strengthening that questioning ability in our lives and trying to face life with a degree of seriousness with which it deserves to be taken.
Yeah. Well, I think that's awesome. And learning to ask questions, right, is the root of self-inquiry, which leads to self-awareness. And I think a lot of people just succumb to nihilism or existential crisis because they're not asking the right questions. They're just telling themselves what they've been told, or, telling themselves that the negative message that they're just bombarded with is reality. And it doesn't have to be our reality, right? It's a reality. It's a co-created abysmal reality, but it doesn't have to be either our individual reality or the collective reality. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I think, look, we all have a certain amount of agency over the sorts of questions that we ask in life, even, how we perhaps develop our characters, our souls. But I was thinking about this the other day, Mark, and I think this is along the lines of what you're saying here. I think as much as we can say we need to start asking better questions, we need to, start living the examined life, we also need to approach this with a degree of humility in face of this task, to say, it's really, really difficult to actually be completely honest and open in our questioning. Honest as in, are we willing to hear the answers when we ask the questions? I've been thinking about this personally for the past many years. And, when you start stripping away the layers of yourself, trying to find that that inner truth, you might say, or that you might say that inner temple from where you can receive true insight that would guide you forward in life. It's really difficult to know whether or not you're being honest with yourself, because there's all sorts of motivations that are flowing in, and you've
Right.
been trained from a young age with all sorts of preconceived ideas and notions of who you are, what you're supposed to be doing with your life.
Right.
And to strip that stuff away and to find, okay, how can I gain true insight about myself and my direction in my life is just so difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
so to anybody who is embarking on any sort of philosophical path towards the examined life or a spiritual path, it's like, take heart, because you're going to have to lose a lot of who you thought you were in service of finding who you really are. and
Right.
and and so it's not easy. And I think uh, I speak about this now because it is so much the part of my life that I'm currently going through
Mm-hmm.
is. And
Mm-hmm.
you probably get this because if you read something like The Poet and the Sage, it's the kind of book that I couldn't remain the same person that I was before I wrote it
Yeah.
after I had written it.
Right. I love that about writing. It really does. You have to become what you're what you're writing. You change through the process of writing a book like that, especially poetry.
Yeah, you can't help it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that you're getting your master's in divinity, so I'm going to ask this question because it speaks to what you're talking about. Because there's two kind of views of life. One is that we are broken and that we need to be healed through therapy and spiritual rejuvenation or whatever. And the other is that we're perfect the way we are. All we have to do is recognize our perfection. The first, obviously, representing kind of Western psychotherapy, and the other kind of Eastern Buddhism and other Eastern traditions. What are your views on this?
Hmm.
Or is it a both and?
Yeah, well, I lean towards that, but perhaps only because I don't have the courage to have a definite answer in this moment to a question like that. So
Yeah.
maybe we can play around with this a little bit. Um, I think. Okay, let me tackle it from this angle, and I'm going to go back to my own work because now you're reminding me of a few things that I actually wrote in this book, and a recurring theme that keeps on coming throughout my poetry is that we are built upon virtue.
Mm-hmm.
Virtue pervades every part of us as human beings. One of the reasons you might think about that is, well, you put an apple into your body and you don't have to do anything. The apple gets digested into your body, and it feeds your body, it becomes you, right? Now
Yeah.
you're not thinking, okay, apple, go into my body and do this and become this. No,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
happening because
It
we are
just
built
happens.
upon this extremely complex but virtuous system that simply is. It is
How do you
doing.
find virtue? How do you define virtue?
Well,
Something.
virtue is in, there's a perfection. There's an
Mm.
absolute perfection to the processes of our bodies, to the, even just to the structure of the universe. I was talking with David Feidler
Mm.
the other day. He just recently wrote a book called Breakfast with Seneca,
Mm.
and he shared with me that the original uh, the original definition, if you take the etymology back far, 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 of cosmos, right? So cosmos actually means beautiful order, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look
Yeah.
up at the stars, you look at how perfect everything has to be for us to even be here in this place, in this time, talking. It's like there's a beautiful order to everything. And so in that way, there's a certain virtue that pervades everything, a certain perfection. But nonetheless, I think you can probably uh, uh, see something in this, Mark, that if we inquire within, I think that most of us would say that we can recognize that we're not everything that we could be.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a certain distance that
Mm.
we have yet to travel. And I think I would say that the recognition of both of those elements, that there is a certain perfection to this scheme, this game of life. There is a certain perfection to you and your body and your soul, but nonetheless, we are called to take that beauty and turn it into something even better. And I think that we have that gift as human beings, and I think that we all recognize from time to time that we could be so much more than what we are if we would truly take life seriously.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I'm also um, well, I lack clarity on it because it's one of those unanswerable questions, probably. But I'm torn between with this idea that we can be better. It has a sense of like I'm not doing well enough. When you know, essential to my growth has just been recognizing that I am enough and that God is in me, right? Or moves through me, right? Is the spirit that moves through all things, or the Holy Spirit, or however, whatever language we want to use. And so I've come to kind of drop the needing to fix phase of my life and moving to the recognition of the wholeness that already exists. It's similar to the meditative concept of kind of lifting the veil that obscures the virtue, obscures the perfection.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean that I'm broken. It just means that I don't recognize my wholeness yet. Now,
Yeah.
then the flip side of this is what's preventing me from recognizing my wholeness is a lifetime of flawed conditioning and false ideas and negative, thinking. And so it's those things that need to be dropped. So in that sense, there is some fixing of the temporal rational so that you can appreciate, the eternal,
Yeah.
which is already
Yeah.
there.
Well,
So
I
it is
want
kind
to
of a both end, I guess, to me.
Yeah, I want to keep on going on what you're saying there, because I think that it's important and profound that there's something about the recognition of the just extravagant beauty of this moment, this time, this place where you are, even where you are as a human with all of your imperfections.
Right.
Uh, there's something about the recognition of that wholeness, and the gratitude for that is able to pull us into a deeper relationship with the divine, you might say.
Right.
I wonder if I might read you something. Is that okay?
Yeah, please. I wanted to
I
hear
just
more of
thought,
your poetry, and I've got some other pieces that I want to read as well.
well, I just thought it was appropriate for this particular moment. I wrote a piece recently called On Joy,
Hmm.
and it just goes like this. There is great joy to be found in the realization that this moment, this time, this place, this scene, this person is perfect and more than enough to bedazzle the eager mind of a true poet and seer.
Hmm.
So to me, I think that speaks to what you're trying to say,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Mm-hmm.
if we can pause, reflect, and seek deep gratitude in this moment just by looking around at what is here right now, it's almost like that is a gateway through into the realm of healing, personal healing and personal growth,
Right.
that does not involve finger pointing, does not involve saying, well, I'm imperfect, I'm not enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. But no. Just pause and reflect on how much is here, kind of an abundance sort of mentality. And there's a certain healing there. So yeah, I don't know. I think that what you said was in line with that.
Yeah. Yeah. What's coming to me now is the idea of kind of effort and surrender. Um, it takes effort to do acts of goodness, right? Or act, like the commandments, to treat my neighbor as myself. That takes effort, and there's action involved. And then there's a point in time where surrender is what's required. And surrender doesn't require action, it requires inaction or absence of action, like surrendering to the divine in a moment of grace or a sunset or when your baby's born. And some people have those experiences automatically, but when we can learn to surrender to balance out the action, then we have more harmony in our lives.
Yeah.
So you also wrote back to this idea of asking questions, which leads to us to contemplation. I imagine writing poetry is really an act of asking a question and then contemplating and then allowing, surrendering to see what comes out of you, sort of. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's more to it than that. You probably spend days trying to come up with 2 really good lines.
Well, it's funny. Yes and no. I've never spent time trying to come up with anything, and I want to maybe give some sort of answer to that people might understand, because I think it, without wanting to, I don't want to sound pretentious here, but the artistic experience is something that many people just do not necessarily have access to, because not everybody is built as an artist. Right. Now I think that the religious experience of being moved deeply is something that is kind of a human universal. But when I'm writing poetry, it's funny. Even coming up with the questions is not necessarily something that I'm always trying to figure out. I've often found that when I write poetry, I'll have like a routine. It might be, okay, like at 8:00 at night, I start writing poetry, and the question might come to me in the 2 minutes before I start writing poetry. And it's not something that I was thinking about. It's something that just, so that's what I'm writing about tonight. Okay. And I've told this to people as well. I often find that some of my best poems, and I think that there's 2 or 3, well, The Poet and the Sage is one large poem that I had this experience through, but there's a few poems in The Poet and the Sage where I didn't know what the poem was truly about until the last 2 or 3 lines, and then everything came together, And
do you feel like, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
Go on.
Do you feel like you're channeling, or the information is, coming through you, or do you feel like it's a product of your brain, your own brain?
Well, I mean,
or both. Again, it's hard to answer those questions, I know.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's before writing. Okay, let me put it like this, because a lot of this I don't even understand. And here's the thing: I was recently on another show with another poet from Australia, and he sent me something to listen to of his before I went on his show, and I listened, and all of the same sort of symbolism and archetypes used in his poetry that you see in mine. It's very strange, the tree of life, all this sort of stuff, and the vine and the fig. And so I actually, I knew that he was somebody who really understood me deeply as a person, because he was writing from the same place. But when I was on the show, I read him a poem, and he's much more educated than I am in the world of poetry, archetypes, metaphor, symbolism, religion, all this sort of stuff. And he said to me, do you know why you wrote about the fig and the vine in that poem? And I said, I have no idea. Deeply, I know. Deep down within me, there's something that knows why I put that in the poem. And it speaks to me in a certain way, but I haven't been able to articulate it. And he said, well, so the fig actually represents fertility and birth, and then the vine actually represents the traveling between the highest of the tree of life right down to the roots, and the information traveling up and down there. And he's saying this, and I'm thinking, oh, okay. And So I go back to something that my auntie actually said, and this isn't this the funniest thing? Like a struggling poet talking about how his auntie talked about his poetry. It's like, it's so sad, right? But what she said was true. Right? What she said was true. She said, Simon, you're a poet, but you're not a trained poet, and that's exactly how it should be. Meaning,
Right.
I'm not trying to get a message down on the page. What's happening is I've been forced into this in a way. I didn't know I was a
Hmm.
poet until I wrote The Poet and the Sage. After that, I was sure that that's. And the funny thing is, Mark, my dad is a beautiful poet, but I never read poetry. I never paid attention.
Mm.
Like, he's a beautiful wordsmith, and so I know that that's in me.
Yeah.
But to your question, is it being channeled or is it just coming from the brain? I mean, I don't know if there's necessarily a difference, but to me, it's more of that truly artistic um, experience, and there's always something prophetic in true art, I believe,
Hmm.
because there's something. It's a message being channeled through. You might think the artist is the radio, the message is the signal coming through. And
Hmm.
if the artist is in the right place at the right time, in the right mindset, willing and open to being that radio, the signal will be received and
Yeah.
it will come down onto the page. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, or
Yeah. No, it does actually, and there is a very distinct difference between being being passionate and open to receive versus, you know, kind of like the efforting of thinking about this concept relating to that concept, and trying to put it together in words that would sound poetic.
yeah.
Right. they're,
And I just
they're
can't
very
do that.
different processes.
I'm not an academic.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty bad student, I'll even say.
Well,
Because
it's
all I
like
ever want to do is
Beethoven.
I just want to do what I do.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the musician, just having the just putting on paper without any thought, Beethoven's ninth or whatever, it's like that channeling. I believe that's real and can happen.
Hmm.
Not to say you can't also create brilliant works, through the thinking process.
Yeah.
So, you're a musician as well. Do you write words for your music? Because that's also
I
a form of
haven't
poetry,
started
right?
doing that yet.
You have not?
But people have commented to me that they can tell that I'm a musician when they read the poetry, because
Interesting. Yeah.
it is that there is a real rhythm to a lot of the stuff that I write, and it naturally comes out. Um, I just haven't bridged the two yet. Uh,
Right.
I mean, I sing a lot of jazz standards, is what I usually do at gigs, but in my own personal creativity, I spend a lot of time on piano. I'm picking up the didgeridoo at the moment, which is an
Mm,
absolute joy. And that
nice.
was actually my first instrument, by the way, but I left it for 20 years. Um, and I never really learnt it when I was young, but I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with Aboriginal culture, and then I kind of just dropped away from that. But now I'm starting to revisit these instruments that were my original first loves. And so I think with my music, it's much more of a kind of Dionysian experience, you might say, of letting go and allowing the experience of true creativity to kind of pour out through the instrument, through a love of the instrument. And um, I think this actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the way that you approach things. The way that I've started to approach my music is not, um, again, not from this kind of well, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write this piece, and I'm going to put this here, I'm going to put that there. uh, I tend to want to build a relationship with the instrument, truly love this instrument, and
Hmm.
really engage in that experience of pouring that love through the fingers onto the instrument and seeing what happens. and
Right.
often it sounds terrible. Um, and sometimes you find little moments of gardens in the middle of the desert,
Hmm.
and that's kind of how I'm approaching my music at the moment. Yeah,
Do you think that your music informs your poetry or vice versa?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
If people go on YouTube, they can find my first piano album that I recorded. I recorded that about a year after it must have been actually about 8 months after I started really picking up the piano. And so it's a piano album. It's got my vocals on it as well, and it's set to the backdrop of these beautiful nature scenes up here in the hinterlands of the
Mm.
Sunshine Coast. So it's real like spirit work in the natural scenes that I grew up in,
Hmm.
and it's a very strange kind of mystic album. And I think that what people will get is if they listen to the music is I play music because the music says something that my poetry can never say. And I write
Interesting.
poetry because my poetry says something that my music and my philosophy can never possibly say. And I speak on the podcast because speaking directly to people heart to heart, whether it's through interviews or just solo episodes, I can say things there that perhaps my poetry and my music can't get across to people. And so the music absolutely is an integral part of what I'm doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see almost like, you as a one man show, you weaving the poetry and music and explication, or just channeling dialogue. That would be fascinating kind of hybrid medium, right, for expression.
Yeah.
You probably already do that on your podcast. Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
way, I'm trying to figure out how to do that, because it's
Right.
uh, you're right. I've got the same vision, I've got that same vision of how do I bring these art forms together in a way that uh, explores all of these ideas effectively so that people can get what they need to get out of the music and out of the poetry and out of the philosophy. And
Hmm.
um so that's my ultimate challenge, because
Yeah.
you can think, okay, well, pick a side. How are you going to teach people? But I just know that that's not going to work for me, because when I pick a side, all I want to do is the thing that I haven't chosen. So, so I, you know
Well, I imagine that just like what you described about your writing, you just need to just do it.
yeah.
Surrender to it and just do it and see what happens.
Well, I will say that with the Poet and the Sage, something I've been procrastinating terribly is putting together the audio book.
Hmm.
But I have recorded the first three poems in the Poet and the Sage, and the way I recorded them was actually I sat down and I sang the poems,
Okay.
improvised,
Yeah.
and then I went back and I recorded another level of me singing with a harmony, but not planned, but like trying to listen to the previous voicing and to
Uh-huh.
respond to it, and then add another layer and then add another layer. So it's very, very strange. And that's so what I'm hoping to put together with the audiobook for the Poet and the Sage is perhaps in the same style that they would have used to read their poetry back in ancient Greece, which was a
Right.
lot of it was sung. It was meant to be
Right.
sung, and so that's in the works. Although I understand that may be here in about 20 years with all that I'm trying to do at the moment. So yeah,
That's awesome. I want to go back to I don't know a ton about music, but I think it's fascinating to think about these ancient instruments like the didgeridoo. Do you think it would work to merge or to combine instrument like didgeridoo into a modern jazz piece or setting?
yeah, I'm almost certain that people have done that.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I would say so. It's it's such an incredible instrument,
Huh.
and it's it's so much more versatile than people give it credit for as well. There is so much that you can do with this instrument, and for me, I think what I want to do with it is Well, my plan is when we move to the United States, because my wife is from Texas, so we're currently in
Mhm.
that process of
Okay.
trying to get over there. But
Are you going to move to Austin like everyone else?
no, no, uh, I don't think so. None of this. I think we're actually going to be closer to you. We're going to be heading over to California.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But I want to bring over a couple of leather bags full of, just some clothes, a couple of books, and I want to bring my didgeridoo. I want to try and get
Right.
rid of as much as possible before I head over there. And I would love to just go around and even just go busking on the street, with this didgeridoo, and
Right.
just have that experience of sitting there in a city that I don't know, responding to the city with
Oh,
this
wow.
extremely versatile instrument on its own. Because a lot of the time you see the didgeridoo played as an accompaniment to other
Hmm.
instruments or
Hmm.
to the guitar or to singing and stuff like that. And so it's kind of just a drone. You've just got this
Yeah.
drone. But if you just get it by itself and if you really listen to what's going on, it's profound, how many strange, weird sounds you can get out of
No, that's
this
cool.
tree. You're essentially playing a tree. That's it. So yeah,
I'm
so
going to be a little
it's a cool instrument. Yeah,
I'm going to be a little self-serving now, and I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have the instrument handy?
I do. Yeah.
Would you be open to just strumming a few things and letting us know
Yeah,
what it
yeah.
sounds like?
All right, I'll do it. I can't guarantee it's going to sound great through
Okay,
the
well, no guarantees, and we won't hold you to it.
and also, yeah, just
I can
it's a
guarantee it would
work in
sound better than if I
progress.
did it, right? I'm
Yes. Okay, it's a work in progress. I'll put this microphone down here.
check.
So this is it here. It's just a beautiful big stick.
Yeah, it's a big long stick.
There we go. There we go.
That's
It's
wild.
wild, hey?
That is wild. And it was
Yeah.
amazing to see, the fluctuation of the pressure in your cheeks and mouth as you're manipulating the air through it.
Yeah.
Is it difficult?
Yes and no. Look, I'm actually a trumpeter first.
Okay.
That's what I got my
Yeah.
degree in, trumpet and singing. So, but I've always found that my mouth is kind of very, it's like very flexible and has the ability to kind of do a whole bunch of weird little things, and so that helps with the instrument.
Right.
Um, and and I think that being a trumpeter that helps me because I've had that experience of that sort of stuff.
Right.
Um, but I think it's also an instrument that if people give it the time, the biggest thing that you're going to have to overcome is the circular breathing.
Right.
Uh, but also, like I find I love this instrument because it really allows for just extreme creativity in the process and improvisation in the moment. And so, um, yeah, it's a profound instrument. I have to tell you this too, Mark. I 2 days after I bought this instrument, it was one of, I went into this beautiful didgeridoo store up in Cairns, and it was exactly like walking into the wand store in Harry Potter. It's like the wand chooses you. Like
Right.
so I'm going around and playing all of these different. Not this one, not this. This is the one. Like, and I found it, and that was my instrument. And 2 days later, we were up in Port Douglas, and I walk into this Aboriginal art store. You can see there's actually a couple. So these are both Aboriginal pieces of art by a
Right.
beautiful artist from the Northern Territory. But we went into this art store, and there was this guy there. His name is Trevor, a
Hmm.
stunning Aboriginal artist and elder from up in Cairns. And we had this 3-hour conversation that day, uh, talking about the mythology of the Aboriginal people, talking about the tradition of the instrument, and why it is that only men are allowed to play the didgeridoo and women
Huh.
play the. Well, we've got these rhythm sticks here.
Uh-huh.
So these yeah, and so. Um, we just talked for so long, and we're talking about how the mythology of the Dreamtime stories matches up with the story of the Garden of Eden, and
Hmm.
he's just dropping all of this wisdom on me, and I'm just thinking, there is such a stunning, rich tradition in Aboriginal culture of music making and spiritual enlightenment and enlightenment with the land as well.
Hmm.
And so I think that when you start to play an instrument like this, it helps you to have a foundation like that, knowing that this is, you know, uh, there's so much to this instrument and there's so much to this tradition. And to me, when people read the Poet and the Sage, they'll see all the symbolism of the tree and all of these deep archetypal metaphors and stuff like that. So to me, when I'm playing the didgeridoo, it's like, man, I'm playing a tree and I'm going back to just my absolute
Mm.
roots.
Right.
So I think it's a very it can be a profoundly uh, enlightening instrument for people as well.
Yeah, that's wild. What's kind of coming to me is like you're playing Mother Earth, and I wonder if some of the
Yeah,
vibrational quality is like that 480 hertz, which is the Earth's, vibration. If it actually kind of resonates like that.
they believe that. That to the Aboriginal people, it's extremely. And I say to the Aboriginal people because perhaps uh, you know we need to understand how they get to that experience of
Right.
it being a deeply spiritual instrument, one that can enlighten the individual.
Mm.
And so when I say to the Aboriginal people, I'm not saying only to them.
Right.
My conversation with Trevor up uh, in the north in Queensland, he gave me every indication that he was extremely happy about me taking on this instrument with a degree of seriousness,
Right.
and
The sacredness.
um, and you even think about this. I mean, when you learn to circular breathe, something that I wrote, I was doing these meditations when I was first learning it a few months ago, and I would be playing, and then if something came to my mind, I'd write it down. And one of the things that I wrote down, it brings you into this kind of strange place where you recognize there's almost like this snake-like,
Hmm.
serpent-like part of you where if you're circular breathing, it's like you become the same thing with the instrument because it's the air is coming in through your nose, going through your body, and then out through the instrument. It's one tube that's just it's like,
That's amazing.
and it's just so interesting to think that you can get into this circular breathing, and you think about what that's going to do after like an hour of circular breathing,
Right.
just in out in out in out. And it's just it's it's profound. So I don't pretend to know everything about it, and I
Well,
still
that's
have so
cool.
much to learn about the culture and tradition. But
Well,
it's yeah,
the Vedic tradition and yoga, puts a huge emphasis on pranayama, breath control, as well as sound, you know, vibratory quality of the sound. And so you're combining two deep spiritual practices there with the
yeah,
circular breathing and the sound of the didgeridoo. So it's
yeah,
not surprising to me at all that an extended period of time on that, both in a single session, would create a higher state of consciousness, but also over time that you're elevating your consciousness because you're doing spiritual practice through the
yeah.
music. That's really cool.
Well, I have to say as well. I mean, one of the things that there's one thing that I really, really want to do with this instrument, and I want to know what you think that would happen in this circumstance. But I want to get a person right in front of me, and I want to get this didgeridoo. I want to stand there. I
Blast
want to
them.
ask them a few questions about their life,
Right.
and then I want to stare right into their eyes, directly into their soul as I improvise a piece on the didgeridoo, looking at them. I want to know if we could even lock eyes for longer than 10 seconds in something like that. But I wonder what would happen if we build a quick connection, look into their eyes, and just start playing.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So that's
Well,
that's my goal.
you
So if
could,
anybody
you,
wants to do that when I come over
yeah,
to
I'd be,
America,
when you come over here, let's do that. I think it would induce a resonance,
yeah,
a harmonic resonance between the um, two humans that could then open up channel for information and insight.
yeah.
That's cool. I'm marking that on my to do list right now. So
Please do. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
you wrote piece called "Have a Think," and I wanted to read some of these because talk about asking good questions. And another practice of that I really appreciate in my own life, and I recommend my clients do, is to journal as part of their contemplative practice by just choosing a good question. And I thought these questions are just so awesome for people to maybe write down and to use them as objects of contemplation for their own life, which is probably why you wrote the poem. I'm just imagining, you wanted people to think about these things because they were valuable to you. But
Yeah.
it goes like this: have a think about these things. What do you do? Why do you do it? Do you do it, or does it do you? That's an interesting one. I love that. What is of great worth? What is desirable? What is undesirable? What helps? What hinders? What gives? What's given? What takes? What's taken? Have a think about these things. What is wisdom? What is truth? What is it to discern? What is it to be humble? What is it to be aware? What is it to be? What is it to become? What is it to be one? What is it to be not? Wow. That's every one of those would be,
A lifetime pursuit.
right. I was going to say something like that. Would be like, oh, jeez, could take you down a rabbit hole in eternity. Exactly.
Yeah.
Each one of them is like a different gateway into your own reality to discern truth.
But you
That's
know
cool.
what?
Yeah.
Can I add something to that? Because I
Please.
mean, yes, each one of those perhaps deserves a lifetime of true seeking. I think the one that I've dedicated most of my time to is what is wisdom? What is to have wisdom? There's that passage in the Bible in John, I believe. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave upon the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. What that verse does is it shows you, do you even know what it means to ask the question, can I have wisdom? And would you even recognize it? Like, are you that in the game that you would actually receive it? I don't think most of us modern humans are, but what I wanted to say was my mentor, Sharon LaBelle, who I highly recommend that you get on the podcast. She's the wisest individual I know, by far. And she, oh my gosh, she taught me this beautiful principle. It actually comes from, who does it come from here? Edward de Bono, who is a writer on logic. And it's this idea called Poe, right? And so he got this word from things like suppose, ponder, these sorts of words. And so the idea is posit the question, but then do not seek to say yes or no. Do not seek the answer immediately, but just sit with the idea, sit with the question. And so I think when I write a poem like that, what I'm hoping, if I'm hoping anything when I'm writing something like that, is that when people read it, they will perhaps not jump to assume that they know the answer to any of those questions, but that they will not yes, not no, no answer other than let's just sit with this question. Let it seep into your mind and soul and body, and just see what happens when that question is posited. What comes to mind? Just allow a little bit of space there. So I don't know. I think that's a helpful principle that Sharon taught me that has stuck with me for a long time.
I love that. Yeah, that speaks to me because capital T truth, spiritual truth, is impossible to articulate with words and concepts, right? And so if you try not to, trying to or articulating a definition or what you perceive to be truth is actually then contracting it into something less than it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fascinating. I love that. And and I love that that's also the root of positive. So if you're positing something, that's positive.
Yeah.
I love, I've spent a lot of time on the what is to be not, right? Because I'm a yogi at heart, and that's really, the science of the mind, starts with kind of like what is the meaning of life by answering what is the meaning of death? What does it mean to be not here physically?
Mm.
And when you ask that question and you look within, you recognize that death can actually be birth or rebirth back to your eternal nature. And
Yeah.
life is a death to that eternal nature back into the more painful realm of suffering of the material human realm, which is
Mm.
very fascinating and beautiful philosophy, actually.
Yeah.
At any rate, we would need a few more hours to go through these questions, so we won't do that. One more question, and then I'll let you go. Why are wildflowers so inspiring to you?
Oh man, I love that question because nobody ever asked me that question, but I'm obsessed with wildflowers. There's a few answers to that, and then there's a bunch of answers that I probably can't even give because I don't know how to articulate them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I've been climbing the mountains here on the Sunshine Coast since I was maybe 12, 13. And I've been hiking through the forests as well and spending a lot of time. But there came a point, I think it was about mid 2020. And I think that this is a it's kind of a standard point along the path, you might say, the spiritual path. Uh, some might disagree. Whatever. To me, it seems as though that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where when I was walking in nature, I started to notice more, like really
Mm-hmm.
notice more, and really pay attention, not necessarily to the whole landscape, but to the very specific little details of things. I started taking pictures of these beautiful tiny little spider webs that I'd find, that these crazy patterns, and I'd find these. I think it was about the just finding these little pockets within the places that I was hiking, uh, where if you just walked past them, you would never know that they were there. But if you stop and look, and I think that the wildflowers, I never understood how many stunning wildflowers there are here on the Sunshine Coast,
Mm-hmm.
right? Until I started to actually pay attention and look. And when I started looking, they were everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And so many varieties, and the way that they burst forth, just it's horrifying beauty. You look at it and you think, like, I mean that. You look at it and you think, oh my gosh, uh, that's something that a human being can never create. We
Right.
can never make something
Never.
that beautiful.
Right.
And so I fell in love with these wildflowers, and every moment that I could get outside of this room doing everything that I'm doing here is like out to the fields, out to the plains, out to the mountains, getting pictures of them.
Right.
And uh, there's also this analogy that kind of guides me in my approach to my philosophy, and it might be helpful for some people. And so I'll try and articulate it because it's a strange one, but I think that the rugged mountain wildflower is something that comes out in my poetry every so often. I call Seneca the Younger, the philosopher. I call him a rugged mountain wildflower.
Hmm.
Uh, because it's in this arid landscape, right? And you have this little seed of this plant that digs its roots into the rocky earth below,
Mm-hmm.
into the depths, and then it reaches its little branches up, and out comes this stunning outburst of beauty and color, and it seems like we can do that with our lives if
Mm-hmm.
we use this wildflower as an analogy for our lives. We are in a rough landscape here.
Mm-hmm.
Life's tough. It's really tough. We've that there's no doubt about that. When we dig our roots, the analogy of the digging our roots to me seems like actually digging your own roots back into the past, taking a look at the dark, murky waters of our history, the great philosophers who came before us, the great spiritual leaders who came before us, these brilliant people who stood out as examples of what humanity can achieve if we truly live our lives to the highest possible good. So when we dig our roots, we're looking for those people, and that's the living waters. You dig your roots deep into your dark, murky history and your past, and you find the living waters there, the things that are going to show you how you can have the true experience in this life now. And we reach our branches up by utilizing those living waters, utilizing what we've learned from our dark, murky past into a more perfected human being now, and the way that we live our lives, we're growing our branches up into eternity, essentially, because we're trying to live our lives for for some future that isn't here yet, but we're reaching up. And on top of that, our lives can be a picture of beauty, as in the wildflowers that grow from our branches. It's hard to articulate this analogy because I haven't thought about it enough to think, how do I actually get this across to people? But it's about, you are this little seed in a very arid landscape. Now you can dig your roots deep and you can reach your branches up and you can bear those fruits of beauty in that wildflower bloom in the way that you live your life and the fruits of your life. And so that's something that it inspires me when I think about that. And when I look at these wildflowers, they speak to a sort of transcendent beauty that cannot be explained with words, no matter how hard I'm trying right now.
No, I love it. I love it. I think what's really cool from my perspective, is whereas the wildflower is beholden to the grace of the rain and the sunshine, the human being has choice and can choose the fresh water of poetry and music and sages advice or stoic philosophy, right? And and the sunshine of positive thoughts and happy, helpful, healing people to be around you, and that nourishes you so that you can sprout and grow and flourish in the world.
Yeah.
And one thing that's unique about humans, I think, is that we can have our feet on the ground in the material animal world with our hands / flowers in the sky reaching for God.
Yeah.
Which is a very precious and sacred place that we occupy as a human.
Well, it's funny, the Stoic definition of wisdom is a knowledge of things human and divine.
Yeah.
And so certainly speaks to what you're saying there, that we are kind of these strange beings stretched betwixt the heights and the depths,
Right.
that's
right.
what we are. And perhaps perhaps there's a calling in that. There's a calling of how good could things be for you and the people around you? How much could you truly contribute in life if you became highly skilled at living between those two worlds?
Right.
And so I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful thought that you give us there.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to put a pin in this, because we've gone for a while, and I'll let you go. But so your book, The Poet and the Sage. Would you like people to find that at your website? Do you have other information there that you'd like them to access, or should they buy it at Amazon, or where do they go to find it?
We don't have it on Amazon yet. Part of that is my own procrastination. Part of that is I'm not 100% sure whether we maybe just want to keep it on the website,
Right.
and sell it from there. But people can go to thewalledgarden.com, and if they click on the store link there, then they can go into the store and they can check it out there. And I should mention to people as well, you can read the poet and the sage on the website. I've got it in a digital format there.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I've got it with beautiful images and everything. But the great thing about the hardcover book is I really put a lot of work into designing it so that it's something that you love holding in your hand. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's a beautiful material bound
Right.
hardcover,
Right.
gold etched. It's got, you know, my photography in there. It's got my drawings and some artwork, and there's poetry there that you won't get anywhere else but the hardcover book as well. So I've really tried to make the book an experience in itself.
Right.
And so I want people to take this book. I want them to go sit by a mountain waterfall or sit under a tree, you know, sit by the ocean, somewhere in nature, somewhere beautiful where you feel inspired. And I want people to sit there and you know,
Yeah. Sit there and
suppose
poe.
with this book, and allow it to do its work. So I hope that people do that, because I know that if they get that hardcover, you know, it's something that they will hold on to. It's not the kind of book that you just
Right.
chuck on your shelf and never look
Right.
at again.
It's
you
not
know,
meant. I agree. Poetry is meant to be experienced, not
yes,
just read.
yeah,
And there's something so beautiful about an actual book that you can,
yeah,
like you said, cozy up with, and you can't
yeah,
get that by reading digitally or on a website.
yeah,
So thewalledgarden.com.
yeah.
What about social media? Do you use social media? Where can people find you there?
We do,
Okay.
but no, not a lot at the moment.
Okay.
I think that's the people who are working with me on the book and on the website and everything. I think that that's their biggest qualm with me, is that I just I can't bring myself to get on social media enough. So it's my biggest struggle in life.
Oh, I hear you. Oh my
I want to
gosh.
be with the people. I want to be, you know, yeah. So anyway, it's so I'll try and do some more, but nonetheless, if people go to thewalledgarden.com, they'll find everything they need to find there. And yeah, let's keep it
That's
simple.
awesome. Yeah, no, I encourage you to stay the course with that, with social media. I actually, this is an admission that might surprise some listeners, but I have other people take my words and put it on social media. I don't actually engage with it personally.
So maybe I need to come to you for some advice over the next few. See if we can get that
that's
happening.
A matter of resources, right? And finding people who can do that well. All right, Simon, it's been a total honor having this conversation with you. So thank you very much for your time. And
seriously, the honor's been mine, Mark. This has been so beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for your insightful questions as well. Really, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, and then let me know when you haul that didgeridoo over here, and you can blast me with it. Let's see what happens.
Only if you put it on your social media.
I will do that. We'll post it all over. That's awesome.
Great.
All right, Simon. Thanks again. You take care now.
Thanks, Mark. Talk soon.